Call this meeting to order. The Attleboro School Committee, please rise and join the committee with pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the purpose of this special meeting of the Attleboro School Committee is to work over the details of our FY14 budget of the Attleboro Public Schools. Just a quick general rehash, and I'm going to hand it off to the key players in the game on this. As you know, Dr. Durkin had presented us with a preliminary budget in May. That budget also included some additional funding needs for the school district. The school committee voted unanimously not only to go with Dr. Durkin's preliminary budget, to also to fund those additional needs. Since that time, the mayor has passed a budget where it's $1.2 million difference from the ones that we passed as a school committee. And since that time, the administration, led by Mr. Sawyer and Ms. McCarthy, and our chairman of the finance, Ken Parent, have worked on a presentation to present to the school committee tonight on how we intend to close that shortfall, and with ways where we're going to try to still gain personnel and keep this district moving in a forward motion. So I'm going to hand it over this time to one of the originators of this budget proposal, Mr. Ken Parent. Ken?
Well, I don't think I can take us through it, but Dave, would you plan to take us through it, or would you prefer if I do?
Happy to do it. Happy to acquiesce to you, whichever you prefer.
No, I think we're gonna let Dave present it, and then I've seen it a couple of times, so I'm sure other people have questions, and I think Dave should just take it away, and people should ask questions when they need to.
Mr.
All right.
Sawyer?
Thank you. First slide is obviously the most general. As you can see, we have the numbers that were approved by the municipal council. So these are the numbers we've been given by the city. And the right column shows the increases over the FY13 budget. I know that we didn't get as much as we feel that we need, but it's important to note that, I mean, these are increases. Total school spending is the top row. Transportation is the second row. And then the number we need to focus on this evening is the net school spending number. And you'll see that our FY14 budget is $2,303,591 over FY13. Any questions about this one before I move on? All right, that number's key because we're going to have this year's budget, account for that number. So looking at contract salaries, we have an increase of basically $1.7 million. We had budgeted a healthcare increase of $745,000. We're expecting tuition reductions that at this point we're using the number $173,000 as our anticipated reductions. The city, we're planning for a holiday on healthcare, which would bring us savings of $190,000. And now that we have better information about the healthcare budget for next year, we think that there's actually $250,000 in savings there.
Can you just explain the holiday healthcare? Just people will be like, what's a holiday healthcare?
Well, I don't know that I'm the best person to
okay.
explain that, but
Or a little bit of what it contains?
Yeah, I don't know if
okay.
I have a full explanation, but basically the mayor is gonna, I guess, almost take a week off from collected insurance, or from charging, charge insurance, since we're a self-funded group.
Okay.
The city's gonna make about, I think he said almost 100, but on our side, it would save us about 190.
Okay.
So, in actuality, it's not gonna change our budget number, our total budget number. What that 190 would allow us to do is take that 190 and use it somewhere else.
Okay.
So still, our net school spending number is the same, but that 190 no longer has to be in healthcare. We could take that and put it to, say, for example, salary line.
Okay. I just wanted the public to know
Yep.
what that was. And
Thank you, Ms. Parent.
Thank you.
I'd like to touch on that too, Dave. And I think everybody needs to know, the reason why they're able to do it is the city of Attleboro is a self-insured. They run their whole insurance program, okay? And even though it's through Blue Cross Blue Shield, they handle all the logistics. So I think from time to time they have significant savings doing it, and it's been great. They've been very low, actually, numbers of adjustments that they've had to make in the last 3 years. On the city side, they've actually offered 0%, I think, for 2 years for their employees handling that program. So that's why they can do it. There's other municipalities that do not do it themselves, and I don't think they'd be able to offer anything like this because they're actually more at the mercy of the healthcare provider than they are, running the whole thing by themselves. So just wanted to cuff that. Good.
I just had one other, and just so that we keep it in the back of our minds, there's no guarantee that next year we'll also have this healthcare holiday. So when we go to put together, or when next year's school committee goes to put together next year's budget, we need to, in our minds, think that we're gonna need to put this 190 back in somewhere. Because we're taking it out of this budget that we're gonna start next week. But there's no saying that the budget, or the fiscal year that we start a week from now, we're gonna have that same opportunity. So I just as a point of reference to keep in the back of our minds, that we may have to find that in next year's budget to
Yes.
replace it.
Good.
Yeah, I think to build off of Bill's point, that 190, if we were to spend on books, we wouldn't need to use that 190 again next year. But if we make that 190 salaries, we're making something that we have to make sustainable. So when it comes to using whatever money we have to remember sustainability versus one-time use, and put that into our thinking of how we want to use it.
Mr. Slade?
So when you add up what we know are our increased expenses and put in where we think we see savings, we end up with an increase in FY14 of $1.9 million. Well, as I showed on the slide previously, we have $2.3 million increase coming. So that means that we have roughly $400,000 to talk about additional expenses. So looking at the funding priorities that we've been using all along through this process, we have identified what we believe are $400,000 worth of our most pressing needs. 2 elementary classroom teachers, a high school science teacher, a half-time ELL teacher, a paraprofessional for the ELL kindergarten program, half-time CTE teacher, 1.0 adjustment counselor, and a 0.5 board certified behavior analyst. All of these positions were on the April 8th preliminary budget request, and they, at this time, remain our biggest concerns. I met with the elementary teachers this week, and we identified 2 grades in 2 schools where the class sizes, we know, sitting here today, the class size would be over contractual limits if we didn't make increases, and which is why we said we absolutely have to have two teachers.
What schools were those? Okay.
Hyman, Fine, and Hill Roberts.
Right.
I just, I spoke with Ms. Walmsley a little bit about our requirements for the ELL
Mhm.
coming up in the future, and I guess we need to have, what is it, 4 more teachers, was it, or to be in compliance?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how we organize teachers and use people who are dual licensed, the number can change a little bit, but the overall need to come into full compliance with ELL regulations is far greater than what we could provide at this point. But yeah, at least 4 teachers.
But I did ask her a little bit further about if we weren't in compliance, like what would happen, and we could be cited, we could have the state give us like a action plan that they'd be there. So I don't know if everyone was aware of what the repercussions might be, where we may, if we're not in compliance, may have to go through this whole process.
The district has not been in compliance all along, and that we keep adding services and keep making progress is satisfying to the state. We work very hard to continue to improve our ELL program, and we're making strides, and the state is looking favorably about the efforts that this district has made. So that's why it's important that we include ELL in this, because while we can't get to what the state requires, we can show progress and keep adding to it, and this proposal does address that.
I think it's just another thing to keep in the back of our mind, because I wasn't sure how, like I said, I didn't realize we'd be cited and possibly be on this whole type action plan with them involved in all the schools, so it's really something we need to keep in the forefront, right?
Important.
Right.
Yep.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer, because I did have a conversation with you regarding Hyman Fine, the elementary level. And again, I just want to reiterate that Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts will be receiving a teacher at the elementary level to help out with the high classroom
That is
numbers. Perfect. Thank you.
And that was, again, a district decision with all the elementary principals because that we all agreed that those were where the greatest needs were.
Great, thank you for taking care of
And
that.
Mr. Commander, you're our special ed director. I would just like you to join into that conversation that Mr. Sawyer just had, your view.
Sure. Well, on this, the priority funding, we've been focusing a lot on behaviors and trying to support the teachers in the classroom with classroom management this year. So the elementary behavioral supports of the adjustment counselor and the board certified behavior analyst will make sure that all of our elementary schools have full-time behavioral support every day of the week in them. So that is the special ed focus of our funding priorities here. And it really will answer something that a lot of the staff have been asking for as well. It's something that the classroom teachers, the counselors, the principals, they're all addressing as a need. So it's great that we're going to be able to give it to them.
Thank you, Margie.
You're welcome.
The administration believes strongly that these positions would do the greatest good for the greatest many with the resources that we have available. This is why we've made these recommendations.
So, and I realize you've talked to the elementary, but and I've already talked to you about this, but I think the committee needs to know you've talked to all levels
Yes.
about their needs, the
Yep.
high school, middle school, and whatever. So that's why we have in front of us tonight what we have. I mean, I just had a short discussion with Mr. Rooney, and he's just elaborating what you said. We've talked to all levels about what their needs are. This isn't, again, it's not a wish list. These are needs, and we're not even really able to fulfill the needs that we currently have, but we're doing the best that we can with the budgetary number that's been presented to us.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you,
I have one
Craig.
other question, sorry.
Go ahead.
The CTE, is that the plumbing position?
No, that's
What is-
already provided for by a grant.
Oh, okay.
So that one was already.
So the CTE teacher, which is what, that's a
This
half?
is it's a halftime. We have a ISSNN program, which is it's a computer networking program, and we have an opportunity to that program was slated to be closed, and we've kind of rethought that, and we petitioned the state permission to keep the program going rather than close it, and they don't normally do that, but they said if we were willing to come up with a half-time position to bring that program back, they would let us keep it going rather than close it. Because once we close it, we have to start from scratch, and it would take many years to bring it back. And by keeping it going this year with this half-time position, we can avoid that process and continue to get the extra funding that comes with the students in that program. So this is an opportunity to not only meet the needs of these students and to keep this program alive, but it's also a chance to make sure that we're getting as many resources back from the state as possible.
And when you ask for the state, is that for the kids that can get credit for this class, or
So
what do you mean you ask that? I'm
the
just-
state has to approve all of our Chapter 74 programs.
Okay.
To receive Chapter 74 funds, we have to have that state approval. And so all of our programs, they go through a very elaborate process to be created in the first place. And then once they're there, they have to be renewed, and there's a whole process where we're reviewed.
And it's a computer, like a basic computer course?
This is this program. Well, it's computers in general, but it's a lot about networking. Like
Okay.
those kids in that program now that was again slated to be closed. They help OIT maintain the network for the district. It's those kinds of jobs. So, while those are our recommendations, I think it's important that we understand that there are still needs that are unaddressed. We're all well aware of it, and I think it's important that we identify some real strong needs that if we were able to find more money in the budget, these are the things that we think would be the next in line to be met. We still have another need for another CTE teacher. We have a CTE program where we could fill an entire teacher schedule with all the kids that we now have to reject from the waiting list. So if we were able to do that, we have twice as many kids taking early education of children than currently do. So that's one. We have classroom, as much as we only had 2 classrooms over 28, We have several grades in the district that are approaching 28, and we could easily use another 3 classroom teachers in the district at the elementary and middle and high school levels to help with class size. As we talked about, ELL, 1.5 still wouldn't get us to compliance, but would go a long way to getting us there. We had talked before about the need for a student service coordinator to help with our compliance issues in the district. The special ed paraprofessional was a flex position we wanted to create to help with some of the behavioral challenges in the district. And as we've talked about at great length, a K-12 science coordinator is something that we need to address at some point. We also have added to the list, the pool has needs, and my understanding is that the drain would be the first project, but there's also a filtration issue as well. So we thought we'd capture all that. So, and again, these aren't even all of the things that we could use, but these are, again, that sort of next level of priority for us.
Regarding the K through 12 science coordinator, that is a huge hit, huge, because our science programs at the middle school, they just, and I'm going to use neglected in a way, because it just doesn't have the support like the
That's right.
math, the ELA, and so this is a huge, huge hit.
Yep.
Again, due to budgetary issues, what can we do? But I'm just stating that out there because so many people have come to me, staff and everything, is that this is a big, big hit. And
Yeah.
we've had a lot of staff that, where it is today at the middle school, have gone above and beyond
Absolutely.
in having their own support and taking their extra time.
Picking
So
up the slack.
exactly. So I'm just putting it out there because I know it is a huge hit,
Yep.
especially for the science level with this lack of support
Yep.
and the neglect, if you will, you
Yeah.
know what I mean, that it has taken on. So, I mean, we do have to do, what we have in front of us, but I just wanted to just put that out
Yeah,
there.
this
that-
need is not going away.
Right.
It's only gonna get more
It's only
dramatic.
gonna, and delaying it another year, but what are you gonna do? But I just needed to put that out there, that's huge.
I spoke to one of the nurses at one of the middle schools, and I guess they're sharing a nurse or someone who's retired or something, so I don't know where that piece might fit in, because we don't have the nurses that I think we need at all schools.
There is a nurse in a full-time nurse in each middle school,
Mhm.
and then there is a floating nurse for the district who
Okay.
goes to the schools where they're needed. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, the floating nurse rotates 3 days 1 week, 4 days the next week, and it's actually in addition to all the schools being staffed with nursing appropriately.
Okay.
She helps, sometimes her role is to help if a nurse is out for some reason, so sometimes she does go and do that. But more often, she's helping when there's certain initiatives taking place in school, if they need to do certain types of testing, if they're gathering certain data. So she's working throughout the district and supporting all of the nurses.
Okay, so we have a nurse then at every level, though, even the other schools too.
Every-
Because at one
every
point, didn't we
building.
have someone filling in that wasn't permanent, or maybe, so now, because from what she said, they needed I thought, a little more support with the nurses.
The
and
the middle schools are
Yeah.
definitely stretched thin.
Okay.
That's definitely true, but there is a full-time nurse at every building.
Does- okay.
And we are looking at using grant funding to bring in some more part-time help.
Oh, great, good.
Definitely need
I
one.
just have one other question, I'm sorry. Like, just looking at the positions and stuff like that, like, elementary, it could be high school. We have teachers, and I don't know if this is an estimate, but we have teachers starting of a salary of 60,000. Where does that figure come from? Like, I know like when,
It's an estimate because
Okay.
we hire some people step one,
okay,
and where there's huge savings on those people, but other people, because they teach something that's very hard to find somebody,
Okay.
we bring in at top step, and so
Right.
it all sort of balances out.
okay, but we are looking to actually
Yep.
grow our employee database, if you will, by either fresh people coming out of college and trying to, because we have a lot of teachers that, and we do have that program that we mentor them. So we, we help them and guide them and, almost like, professional development, all kinds of that. So a lot of times people will say to me, well, wow, I wish I could be a para at $45,000. I mean, I'm just saying. So I'm just wondering how, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to put it out there to let people know we should try to mentor the younger and move them forward, because when we, you know what I mean? And I know sometimes, absolutely, if they have degrees and things like that, absolutely, because we need certain things, but I just want to make sure that we do have that open door, because I notice every time we have a staff position, it's at a very high salary.
Well, it also, these numbers also include the assumption that every one of these people is going to have, sign up for health benefits.
Okay,
Now,
all right,
we
so that's
know-
added in that.
We know that not everyone will.
Okay.
But we have to budget it that way.
Okay.
Because what if everyone did, you know?
No, right. Okay, so it is in with that salary price. So that's good to know. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Barbara.
Just had one more question, it's probably more for Marissa, but the Title I funding, now, did that get cut? Because I know, weren't there some programs at like the Brennan School now that they can't have for math? Because there was some funding cuts there that we had last year, but we won't have this new coming school year?
Title I actually isn't a special education program, it's a program for at-risk youth.
Okay.
So it falls under Dave's
Oh, okay.
office, so I will let him be able to.
Sorry,
That's okay, no problem.
Title I, well, we're anticipating that the state, I don't think we have the actual number yet. If we do, we just got it. It's this time of year that we get that number. We're anticipating a cut, a significant cut, like 10% or so. And, we had to eliminate a couple Title I positions. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. Title I funding has gone down every year for as long as I've known. So we have to be focused on where we put the resources. And we have to, those resources have to go to Title I schools, but they also have to go to the ones that are level 2. The level 2 schools need to get the resources ahead of the level 1 schools, and we also target elementary before middle school, because it's supposed to be sort of an elementary literacy support, but we expand a little bit beyond that.
About how many students approximately you think that would affect then if they're cutting that out from the school?
Well, if we're removing services from a middle school, it's hard to know exactly how many kids are affected, but only Title I students get Title I services, and that's about 30% of the district. So it varies from school to school. But in a school, so if you have a school of 600 kids and about a third of them would get those services, it's a significant number of kids.
Now, those teachers, though, we will still be able to keep them and utilize them in
Yeah,
other
we're
areas,
we're
though,
not
correct? It's
laying off
not-
anybody. We're just
Okay.
moving them into other vacancies and shuffling things around.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, before we move forward, I just want, I think it's, everybody needs to be clean. We're throwing out the words "out of compliance," okay? And some people say, "Oh my gosh, we're out of compliance." Well, probably 80 or 90% of the school districts in Massachusetts are well out of compliance. I think we need to touch on that. Compliance has to do with available funds that you have and whether or not you have a plan. And that's why Massachusetts is one of the states who is able to opt out of the No Child Left Behind.
That's right.
Because of these issues. So I just wanted to touch on that a bit because I don't want somebody to pick up, "Geez, we're out of compliance." It's statewide, it's national-wide,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, the state is always, adding new regulations and new requirements, and they give us time to meet those targets, those goals. And again, as long as we have plans to get it, it's less. In different measures, different things are necessary, but it's often the case that when we're falling short in an area, it's not that we're it's not that we're doing something wrong. It's that we need to prove that we are, again, taking the steps towards addressing whatever the issue is. And as long as we're doing that, then we have the state's blessing. But there are some things like special ed laws where we just don't have any choices about it. We have to do it a certain way. There are other things in which it's a little bit different. And the ELL is changing dramatically across the state. The state has to ensure that all the teachers are able to handle English language learners by, I think, 2016. And that's a major change for all of us. So, as you said, no one's really in compliance yet. So it's about getting there, not about being there.
Thank you. Any more questions before Dave moves on?
So the good news is that maybe we'll get to fund some of these needs that currently don't make it into our budget, but that we all agree that we need. There will be unexpended funds from FY13 that, we hope that the city will return back to the school system. And, those funds could go to some of those needs on the previous line. There is the potential that there'll be further healthcare savings. We're basing our numbers off of our best information, but that's, something that changes, especially with how many of these new teachers need healthcare, how many of them don't. And as we just talked about, that the actual number will probably be different from whatever number we pick today. And there could be more money that comes available there. There have been some questions about circuit breaker, which I'm going to turn it over to Marissa for a second to talk about that.
Sure. We put circuit breaker on here because it is a potential funding source if we need funds. You can use circuit breaker funding for students who we get circuit breaker reimbursement for. So that's about 22 students in the district that we get circuit breaker reimbursement for. We're able to claim circuit breaker reimbursement when a student's education goes beyond about $40,000. So there's 22 students that meet that profile right now within the district. Often those are students that go to out-of-district placements that meet that criteria. So that pool of funds can be rolled over for 2 years. We can keep it in a revolving account. And by keeping those additional funds in a revolving account, what it allows us to do is if we had a move-in student that came to us with a very large tuition, if we had a student whose needs drastically changed and they had to go to out-of-district placement, I wouldn't need to come back and move from the local budget as it's already set. I have a revolving funds for tuitions that I'd be able to use it for. So that's not why we're not recommending to use those funds at this time, so that we'd be able to use them should we have any of those unexpected tuitions come up.
And I did speak with Mr. Sheehan about this plan, and he agreed that he thinks it would be unwise to use those funds at this time. It's not enough of a cushion given that literally one student could wipe out the money in that account. But we all agree that this is money that could be used if we had to.
And we're doing a lot of work to try to make sure we're getting as much circuit breaker funding back as possible. So we're looking at the ways we're writing our IEPs, claiming our equipment, things of that nature, so that we're continuing to build that pool of reimbursement that we get.
I think my only question, Dave, is there any way that we can take this unfunded, staffing request and do it something like a capital improvement request? I mean, 1, 2, 3, these, I think as going forward in the year, I think the spotlight's really gonna be shown on some of these deficiencies. And I think it would serve the committee well anyways, that we know that this is the number one. If we get any type of funding, this is the number one. I mean, the only reason I say that, it's a pretty extensive list of needs, and we've known this quite right along, so I'm not surprised, but I just think we really need to work on that. This is the number one priority, this is the number two, and that could change as the year starts, I realize that, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly can prioritize. The thing is that I think priorities change, especially considering some of these things are driven by enrollment. How many ELL students, register with us over the summer could increase or decrease how important the ELL teachers are in terms of the overall picture. At any one time, a couple people registering to the same grade at the same school rather than across the district could mean that we need a classroom teacher in a place that today we didn't realize we did. So, I mean, we could create a list of priorities easily, but, in a week from now or a month from now, it might be a little bit different. That's my only concern.
Nicely. Good, Ken.
And I think another big factor with the priorities is timing. Unspent funds, we might get back in November if we get them back. Healthcare savings, might not know that till January. Circuit breaker, we might not know that. You might not feel comfortable January saying that no kids have moved in yet. Maybe we can take half of it. So the priorities might have to go around to not so much teachers, because the problem with teachers is that class is already set up forward, but could be paraprofessionals to help out, specialists, and then also what I'm thinking is that we need the pool. We can't forget about the pool, 75,000, another 75 for Pilsner, and we got parking lot problems that we have to work on. So when you're building your list of priorities, maybe put that stuff, because we get later in the year, staffing, almost the scales change. Another additional point about staffing is what I said before. That's something you have to sustain every single year. So every year we need to have that money again. You don't have to fix a parking lot once for like 10 years. It's not something you have to pay for every year. And I understand that, that we have that right now we have 399 all staff, and we've always been, our priority was staff, and so that's definitely where 399 needs to go. But I think overall, I want to thank Dave and Mercer, especially Tom. You guys have done a great job with this budget. Every time I sent any of your questions, it's been very quick, and I know there's been a lot of reiterations, and everything was explained greatly. And I think you guys kicked every tire. As Tom said, you kicked every tire. There's no more blood from the stone, right? That's as much as we can get, 400. So 400's a better place we were on June 17th. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. Let's talk about the main drain for the pool. That can't come out of next year spending anyway, that's correct? I didn't think anything to deal with the pool could come out of next year spending, but I mean, I thought we were looking in revolving accounts to pay for that.
We could possibly use revolving accounts. We'd have to look at where the maintenance level is, and it would be Jason's recommendation. I don't see why you couldn't use 75,000 from one of those accounts, but normally we try not to. But 75,000. Look at something later. If money comes in, we could use it from whatever number.
Well, we can use it for the money that we get back from the city.
Yeah, we use it from the money back from the city. We can save healthcare, just transfer line items.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I hope everybody realizes Tom Rose has a family commitment today, and he's been working with the administration feverishly over the last couple of weeks here to make sure this presentation goes off. So we just think it was right to bring him all the way back from New Hampshire tonight. He deserves the time with his family, but I don't want anybody thinking in any way, shape, or form that Tom has not been front and center in this. He absolutely has, and I really respect him and all the administration for getting back to everybody on the committee. If they had questions, I believe they were answered up till today, so we didn't have to have major discussions about it. So Dave, please.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would add my gratitude to Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Story, and Mr. Rose. I think part of the reason that we've been able to execute this as smoothly as we have so far is that these priorities have stayed generally consistent since the first presentations that were made to us in April. And I think that this may sound somewhat contradictory, but I think what that sort of demonstrates is the need to look at the priorities on a year-round basis. Because the reality is, although I know there's a lot of discussion about the $1.2 million difference between what the school committee approved and what looked as though it was ultimately going to be appropriated by the city government, but I mean the reality is, I think this is an important piece that we should reiterate. The school committee's job is to approve the budget based on the needs of the school system. And so when the administration presented to us on April 20th or whatever date that was, the list of all the priorities and the needs going into the new school year, there was really no other number that we could, I think, in good conscience, approve, because otherwise we would we can either choose what's based on the recommendation of our administrators with regard to the needs of the district, or we can choose an arbitrary number, and I don't think anyone expects us to be approving arbitrary budgets. That being said, the reason we have to look at it year-round is that these priorities do evolve, that this is a fluid situation, as Mr. Sawyer has already pointed out. So I think that it's a conversation we'll have to come back to time and time again. But the reality is that we've chipped away at a lot of the priorities. If we had $1.2 million or any other amount, there would be more priorities that we could fulfill. But frankly, just the nature of public education is such that there is no set amount of money that would be able to allow us to cross off all of our needs and all of our priorities. It's just not the way the nature of the organization. So again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for keeping us informed throughout the course of the process. And it's nice that, at least for the moment, we'll be moving on from that process.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's kind of been thrown out there, and I think more in the media than anything that, the school committee is going to have to make some cuts. We're going to be here to talk about cuts. Cuts were never part of the plan. The plan was to add priority personnel. I mean, and it wasn't just give the schools more money. We put it right out there where those, the funding is going to go to. More teachers in front of more students, make for a better education. I mean, it just doesn't get any easier than that, I believe. And I was trying to write down the last string, and I know if Dr. Durkin was here, she would actually be frowning on me, but it's always the three ours, as she called it, realign, readjust, and I couldn't think of the last one, but it's reallocate it or something like that. That's what you have to do all year long, and that's something that she did during her 7 years here. And as Dave just pointed out, something we constantly have to do all year long. I think what has happened with this budget, we did as a committee, did what we voted on unanimously and what we thought were the needs, and I applaud all the committee members for doing it. That's what we're here for. It also opened up some eyes in the city. It has opened up a great amount of discussion with them. There's been numerous talks about it, and there's been a promise of numerous talks moving forward. But I think maybe, as Dave just pointed out, those talks have to be ongoing through the course of the year. We can't just sit down and start talking about it in April. Even though it's hard, because we don't have the numbers, really, from the state until, March, the earliest, the cherry shoots. But the conversation needs to be ongoing. We don't want to surprise anybody at the last minute and say, woof, we got this in front of you. So, a good point, and I appreciate that. So, I think we get Dave and then Brenda.
I just add that, Mr. Chairman, I completely agree. The conversation has to be year-round, and the one point I would add is that as important as the substance of those conversations have always been and will always be, the tone is important as well. And that identifying that we cannot get into a narrative where we're dividing the community up into people who care about education and people who don't. The school system will, it's a very much, I think, an all for one and one for all situation where the community as a whole has to value education, has to prioritize education, and make that commitment to education. But the rhetoric is important with regard to that we have to strike the right tone. Otherwise, I don't think we can be effective advocates for the school system.
My biggest thing, just being on the committee for the 4 years, is pretty much is that we've always been an administration that we've been reactive instead of proactive. And moving forward with the new superintendent, and the goal, basically, speaking with him and having conversations, is that we're going to have plans. We're going to be in communication with mayor, council, that we're going to have yearly plans. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 3 years? Where do we need to be in the 5 years? So if we were looking at technology 5 years ago, we would have been here today. But we were never planning for the future. It was always now, numbers, get this going, we need this up. And it was always reactive instead of proactive. So that is a huge thing for the committee moving forward with the administration, is we're going to have plans. It's going to be proactive. We're not going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're not going to be pulling one school up, and once that school reaches where we need it to be, to pull from those resources and throw it into another school where they fell behind. And that's what we always did. So now we're definitely going to be more proactive. So thank you. And I know that, speaking with you, Mr. Sawyer, mostly, I mean, I don't speak a lot to Mr. McCarthy, it's more, it falls on you, but exactly, there needs to be a game plan, a plan for the future, where we need to be, where we have to be, because we're so, especially just looking back now at technology, so, which is a good thing, so that's perfect.
I agree with most of what you're saying, Brenda, but I think we have to also realize that we went through one of the worst recessions that we've ever been through, so I think that affected all districts and what their long-range plans might have been, and where we're sitting
never
today
had
and
one,
compared to
though. That was
funding.
just
You know what I mean?
like-
Because the
right.
funding we're receiving right now,
Right.
realistically, needed to be there 4 years ago,
Right.
in my opinion, 4 or 5
Right.
years ago, so.
I never had anything in front of me to see
I'm not-
where.
I will not
heading
debate that
forward,
argument,
yeah.
you're right, but, yeah.
That would have been nice to try to, right. And then obviously there's gonna be always something that either gets thrown in where there's more of a necessity than something else, but nothing was ever brought forward where we trying to reach somewhere, a goal where we wanna be. So that's a good thing for the future. That's,
Barbara?
And I've had some short conversations with Mayor Dumas, and he's also on board with that. I even suggested that I somehow involve him more in like the finance meetings where he can attend more, and so not at the 11th hour we're saying, here's the budget. So right along we can say, okay, this looks like we're going to have this issue, or like Ms. Furtado said, this is our future plan, and he said you can work things into a budget so that, like, progressing over like 3 to 5 years, now you'll have all the money, like he's done with other departments. I know with like the police department for their computers, each year they're putting in a line item so they can get one computer each year, and by 2015 they'll have their 3 computers that they need. So I think it's a good practice going forward that we can all work together. We can work with the city, the mayor and Dario Cass and all the other parties, so that we can project what we need in the future and not at the last minute be like, okay, now we don't have any funding, what do we do? Because we never want to have to cut. Like you said, we don't want to do budget cuts, so we have to start on this new path, I think, so that we're ahead of the game, instead of at the last minute reacting to the situation.
have any questions from anybody on the committee about the budget presentation plan that Mr. Sawyer and Ms. McCarthy gave tonight? Hey, Ken, I think this is more a formality than anything, since the committee has already took a vote on the budget, but if you would like to put a motion forward about the new number.
I could do that. Make a motion to approve the net school spending budget in the amount provided within the city budget in the amount of $62,382,504.
Second.
Discussion.
Just, Mr. Chairman, just as we discussed briefly, Mr. Parent as well, there will have to be a second vote at some point after those numbers are, although, maybe not with the city council having taken that vote. Do you think, I don't know, I mean,
I think, once the city changes the number, that's where we just get more money, or.
okay,
that-
so
yeah.
this vote is to comply with that policy. That, in that sense, it is necessary.
Yeah.
We voted.
Yeah, the city voted on the budget.
Right.
Yes, it's an official number, so
Yeah.
we really just vote, we're
It-
making a vote just to confirm that we
Allocate.
know our
I mean,
number.
it's a format, there is a vote required by that policy.
Yeah.
That we spoke about. So I think we may want to take a close look at it just to make sure that this complies with it, but either way, we need to vote on it, so.
Well, I think you're correct, Dave. It's been a funky year
Yep.
in our state government, if you will. I don't think there has been a final number from the state.
Right.
But I think the mayor feels that that is the final number, and I think from all aspects that we've been told, if there's any change, it's
Right.
going to be minimal, but they may require.
Certainly for purposes of our discussion and the substantive, and most importantly, what the money's being used for, that we've finished and resolved, so.
And I think it's also important to point out, with net school spending, this is the, city, it doesn't actually have to be at the level every year. It could be a little bit under 2 years in a row and then catch up. And this year, the past year, they actually was a catch-up year, so.
Yep.
So I think their number's pretty much set in stone. I don't think they're gonna change it based on what the state changed as. So if we do this now, I think we're gonna be good, but
Sure.
you guys in policy can double check it, yeah, just make sure.
That's it. You're right, Ken. I mean, we're just trying to conform to the policy that the school committee works by, so. So we do have the motion, it has been seconded. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Furtado?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler, yes. Ms. Corral?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Ms. Zito?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Enjoy our summer.
Okay, right.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Marissa and Dave.
Yes, Marcia.